Wherever you are around the country, word on the street is that the government is pushing hard to remove the 90-day notice periods for tenancy. So what does it all mean? It's part of a raft of sweeping changes that Labor promised during the election that they've just remembered they've got to bring through. They've already banned letting fees. Debbie Roberts from Property Apprentice thinks it's an awful idea and is here to tell us all why. Don't you? Good morning.
Yeah, I do.
So what is it at the moment? What happens?
So at the moment, if you want to give notice to a tenant, and I mean, to start with, I just want to clarify the fact that landlords don't give notice to a tenant unless they've got a good reason to do that.
A serious reason.
Yeah, so, a landlord wants to have long-term tenants in place because that helps cover the cost of the mortgage and all that sort of thing.
But when the gangs move in,
when things go bad, it's good for the landlord to be able to deal with that. And if you're giving notice to a tenant, you have to give 90 days notice now anyway to end a tenancy. You can give 42 days notice if you are moving into the property or if a member of your family is moving into a property. But generally 90-day notice is required. The issue is that you have to prove the reason that you're giving notice to the tenant, or at the moment you can give 90-day notice and the government's calling it without cause. It's always for a reason.
So what will it look like then if the government gets their way?
So if the government gets their way, basically there will no longer be the 42-day notice option. It'll be 90 days, even if you're selling the house or if your member of your family wants
Tenancy
to move in.
for life.
Yeah, so I mean that's not necessarily the end of the world. The thing that I've got an issue with is removing the option to give 90-day notice without having to prove the reason, because it's quite hard to prove in some cases.
Almost impossible as well, because it might be innuendo or whatever, but it's true, but they say it's innuendo and it's not true.
Exactly. And I think the effect that this is going to have on the general public is something that most people haven't considered. The effect on the landlord is obvious, but nobody feels sorry for landlords.
People will exit the market. Everyone thinks landlords are rich.
Yep, and look, like I said, nobody feels sorry for landlords, but I think that people haven't considered the other effect of this.
Yes.
If you talk to people who live next to Housing New Zealand tenants that are dodgy, and I'm not saying that Housing New Zealand tenants are dodgy, I'm saying there's a small percentage that are.
They've even got Sky TV.
So on that point, only 3% of tenants have been given the 90-day notice without cause, as the government's calling it. So it's a very small percentage, and if the government brings this thing in, they're going to be protecting those tenants, because if you can't...
Do they deserve protection?
I don't think so, no. And so if you think about, if you are a neighbour of a problem tenant, let's say they have antisocial behaviour that you can't prove as a landlord, if you're the neighbour of that tenant, you're going to be stuck with them because the landlord will not be able to remove that tenant.
Oh,
and it's like Housing New Zealand.
Tricky and dangerous,
yeah. So Housing New Zealand they've been given a directive that they need, they can't just evict tenants willy-nilly for antisocial behaviour and things like that now.
Bit of eviction.
But will it put rents up? Will that be an increase
Yes.
so that they'll go, actually, we're going to make this sort of harder for people to get into? Up goes the price.
I think there's a number of effects that could happen. So first of all, there will be less landlords that will be interested in buying rental properties because that basically removes their last option, to get rid of a bad tenant. So there could be less people interested in owning rental properties, especially in the lower socioeconomic areas.
Are we already seeing that now?
We have seen an effect. Rents over the last 7 years are increasing at a higher rate than inflation for the first time ever. And I think a large part of the reason for that is because of this, like a war on landlords.
Yeah, they're trying to get their money back somehow. Yeah.
So, we will see increasing rents because of the supply and demand issue. We'll also potentially see an increase in homelessness. At the moment...
The first outcomes
look,
for policy
seriously,
of caring.
More than $3 billion a year is being spent on housing assistance and emergency accommodation at the moment by the government.
I question, actually, whether these changes are made with the best intentions or just simply vote grubbing.
Don't get me started.
That's a good place to end it then. We'll leave it there. We'll get the picture. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
Best. You're fired up about this.
Well,
Property Apprentice co-founder Debbie Roberts. We are 8 minutes away from 9.